So when you log in to Hyblock, it takes you to our product launchpad page. This is where you can get a glimpse of all the tools that we offer. So we'll start off with the charting application. At a high level, this is kind of has all the data, and then the tools outside of this take that data and visualize it in a unique way. Okay. So if you go to the indicators, you can see we have a few sections, right? So we have technical indicators. This comes directly from TradingView. This is your standard RSI, MACD, moving averages that they provide us. So then we provide you. Outside of that, you have 5 different sections. These are indicators that are specific to Hyblock. So this includes buy volume, sell volume, open interest. Let's look at volume delta for an example. So what is volume delta? That's buy volume subtracted by sell volume. Okay. So if you click on volume delta, the standard, we'll let that load. Right. So here you see that it's a bar chart where for each candlestick, we are taking the buy volume and subtracting by the sell volume. For all of our data and all of our indicators are aggregated across all the exchanges. So if you click on the subsetting, you'll see that we have support for all the exchanges. So if I click on, let's say Binance, then the indicator will change. Now, let's say you want an aggregated version. You don't want to select 2 separate exchanges or one exchange. You want to see what is this indicator across all the exchanges. Well, then we have another one called volume delta aggregated, right? So we'll let that load, right? So here, if you go to the subsetting, you can see that all of them are checked off. Now, some of our users want to see volume delta cumulative, which means how is it changing over time, okay? So to do that, we can click on volume delta cumulative, right? So this is now adding over time. And if we want to set like a certain look back period, so what is a look back period is when that cumulative function starts, okay? So let's say I want to say 200 candlesticks, so it'll start there, okay? And then finally, we have the same thing, but aggregated. So volume delta aggregated cumulative, which is the last one over here. Now, how can you use this tool? We have another setting called categories, right? So this is where you can break down this indicator into different trade size buckets, okay? So let's say I wanted to compare retail versus institutional, okay? And I want to do, let's say, a 200 candle look back, right? And for retail, I'm going to classify retail as any trade between the size of $1,000 to $10,000, okay? So I'll click on that there. So now this is only showing me this indicator for trade sizes of within that bucket, okay? So I'll hit OK. Then I can do, again, I can go to volume delta. I can hit this. And then I can now do, let's say, institutional. So let's say 1 million to 10 million, right? And this is, I can categorize as institutions. Again, look back of 200. And I can now combine the two, move it above. And now you can compare how these two are changing. Okay, so I think that's a good overview of order flow. Now we can go into liquidity. So liquidation levels, we'll talk about in a second when we go over the actual product. But outside of the liquidation levels, we have the actual liquidations, right? So what is the actual liquidations? Exchanges provide data when liquidations occur on their exchanges, okay? So they will say, hey, like at this point, we had X amount of liquidations, and we'll take that data and show it to you. Again, across all exchanges. And again, you can categorize and filter that by different buckets. Okay. We also have top trader average leverage used and delta, right? So this is showing you how much leverage users are taking out, long leverage being in green, short leverage being in red. And then this is going to show you the delta between the two. So next we can go to long short. So exchanges also provide a general overview of what percentage of their users are long and what percentage of their users are short, right? So for example, Binance will provide data saying, out of all the accounts on Binance, what percentage are long and what percentage are short. You can compare that to the top traders, right? So again, to see kind of like a retail versus whale divergence indicator, you can look at what's called top trader long short positions on Binance, right? I can change the color of this to maybe like the blue, hit OK, and then we can kind of put these two together to see how that's changing. We also have sentiment indicators. So here you have things like fear and greed index, your funding rate, BitMEX stats, OKX, USDT P2P premium, WBTC mint and burn. And then finally, we can take a look at order book, right? So we talked about order flow, showing the aggressive orders that got executed. We can also look at what are the resting orders or, the bid and ask pressure. So that's this right here. So you can get kind of the full, supply demand picture. So So bids and asks. So greens being bids, reds being asks. You can see how much pressure is in the book. And you can look at it at different depth percentages, right? So 0 to 1%, 2%, 10%, 5%, even go from like 2% to 5%, whatever you want, right? And then here, rather than looking at just the raw number of bids and the raw number of asks, here we'll give you the ratio, right? So you can see how the pressure is changing between bids and asks over time. So the next tool we could talk about is the liquidation levels. Now, the liquidation levels tool is a way for us to predict where we think high level of liquidity lies on the chart and where price might gravitate towards. Okay. So we can go to Binance, BTC, tier 5. And again, we have here is where you can get much more altcoin support. But we can just stick to Bitcoin for now. You can hit run. Okay. See the bubbles look a little bit large here. So we can go to the settings preset. You can manage bubble size. We can hit like maybe 0.3. And here it looks much more readable. So, so what is the liquidation levels tool doing? So as price is moving, we are obviously gathering information. Once we identify an area of high liquidity that has come into the exchange, we will create 3 lines on the chart, a 100x leverage line, a 50x leverage line, and a 25x leverage line to identify where those users may get liquidated. The lines that you see above the chart, this is where shorts will get liquidated. And the lines that you see below the chart is where longs will get liquidated. On the right side, you have what is still, what liquidation levels are still active. So what has not yet been hit by price. And then the bar chart on the bottom is showing the delta between the two. Okay. Now there's different tiers. So right now we're looking at tier 5. Tier 5 is going to have a higher threshold of when we create a bubble, which means it's going to be like a higher level of liquidity that we're looking for us to create a bubble in a line. If you want a lower threshold, so you want to see a little bit more noise on the chart, which a lot of people do prefer, you can go to like a tier 1 and you can hit run, and then you're going to notice many more lines on the chart. Right, so this tier 1 can give you an overall gauge. Are there more long liquidation levels or short liquidation levels overall in the chart? And then tier 5 can give you a better gauge of like where those like big pockets of liquidity lie. Okay. This is set at a 5-day look back. There was a lot of requests to create a longer look back period. This tool is graphically intensive because there's a lot of bubbles and lines and the load time can be long. So to overcome that, what we did is we built the liquidation levels heat map. Okay. So this is a way for you to get a longer look back period without the long load time and see the same type of data, but in a little bit of a different way. Right. So here, instead of creating a bubble in line for every single liquidation like event that occurs or predicted liquidation event that occurs, what we do is we aggregate the total amount of predicted liquidity at different price levels. Right. So let's say we do the 3-month look back and we go to Binance and we hit run. Right. So you can see on the black box that it says 27,200, 27,000, 26,800, 26,600. So it's bucketing by every $200. So when new liquidity gets added to that price bucket, it will increase the size, and that size will then change based on the heat map. Right. So you can see like here, it was like 0, then it got a little bit lighter and lighter and lighter as more and more liquidity got added to this region before it got hit right over here. Okay. All right, so let's switch now. So now let's go to the next one. Let's talk about the net position heat map. What we're doing here is we're tracking, again, where longs are entering, where longs are exiting, where shorts are entering, and where shorts are exiting. And then in general, where open interest is entering or exiting, right? So if we go to, let's say, net longs, we can see if there's any relevant data here. So we can see here, this is where a lot of longs exited their position. Over here, there's a lot of longs that entered. You'll have a tendency to see like at the top, a lot of aggressive people exiting or entering out of their position before price reverses, right? There's usually a large swing in open interest at the tops and bottoms. And that sometimes can also play a role, like a support resistance role in the future. For example, over here, we saw that, price went up, a lot of shorts exited. And once those shorts exited, price kind of went back down. As price went up, it was used as a support resistance line. Price went back down, hit it one more time, price went down, and then shot through it. So next we have the correlation scanner. This is a pretty straightforward tool. Again, just showing you how correlated price action is across different coins. So being very green means very positively correlated. Being very red could be inversely correlated. And white means no correlation at all. And then we have, obviously, we don't care about FTX anymore, but we can look at Binance and we can look at 1 day look back, 7 day, 14 day, or 30 day. Okay. All right, so let's move on. So we'll start with the probability histogram. Right, so what is a histogram? A histogram shows you how many occurrences of what was the range of values that we saw for a specific indicator, and how many occurrences of each of those values did we see? Okay, so let's take an example. Well, first let's set our filters. So we'll look at Binance, we'll look at BTC, we'll do a look back of, let's say, 1 month. Okay, and earlier today we were talking about the global longs distribution for Binance. Again, let's repeat what that indicator means. It means out of all the accounts on Binance, what percentage of them are long? Okay, so in the last 1 month for this indicator, the range of values that we saw was the high was 76.5%, the low was 41.5%. Okay, and these are all the values in between, and this is how many times, based on the height of these bars, that's how many occurrences we saw. Okay, now we also talked about top trader positions, right? Again, a very similar indicator. What is the percentage of top traders that are long, right? Looking at the top trader positions, what percentage of those positions are long? Okay, and we can see from here the chart looks very different. This one we said range from 40% to 76%. This one ranges from 47% to 57%. So a much more narrow range. Okay, so I think understanding the range of potential values that we've seen. Again, obviously new values can happen. There's always swings in the market, but I think it's really important to know historically what range is relevant to you, what is high, what is low, and what is the distribution, and how much have we changed in the last day. Okay, and we have this for across multiple indicators. Again, we'll be adding to this list, but this is what we have support for so far. Okay, so that's our probability histogram. Okay, next we can go to the OI profile. So for those of you who have used TradingView in the past, I'm sure you've used the volume profile on TradingView. What is the volume profile? Essentially telling you how much volume has occurred at each price based on a certain look back period that you define. Okay, so we can mimic that here. So we can go to our volume profile. We can remove this. We can go to Binance, BTC, look back, let's say monthly. Okay, again, this looks a little noisy. So we can aggregate it by, let's say, $50. So it looks a little bit cleaner. So again, just to reiterate, this is the volume profile for the last 1 month for BTC, showing you how much volume occurred at each price, right? Now, what are some of the issues with the volume profile? So one, it doesn't separate buyers and sellers, right? It just tells you raw volume. So what we've done is we've created another level to this tool called a buys and sells profile, right? So this will tell you at each price, what was the delta between buyers and sellers? Was there more buy volume or was there more sell volume, right? The green meaning more buyers and the red meaning more sellers. So taking this same data, digging a little bit deeper, understanding it a little bit more, what does this high volume bar mean? Okay. Now, you also don't know if those people are entering or exiting out of their position. Like you have no idea what the open interest is, right? So we've created another thing called the open interest profile, right? So this will now tell you of that volume, was there was the OI net positive or net negative? So were there more people entering into new positions or exiting out of existing positions, right? So you can combine these two and say, okay, well, there was high volume. Of that high volume, there was a high amount of buyers. Of those high amount of buyers, the OI was actually very positive. So those buyers mostly were entering into new positions, not exiting the market, but entering the market. Okay, so that was the OI profile. The stat analyzer, we won't talk about today. This is our attempt to create a backtesting tool. This is still in beta. It hasn't been completed yet, but eventually we will be supporting a backtesting function. Ideally, what we'd like Hyblock to be in the future is like your one-stop shop from like research to execution, right? So like I think we already cover a large gambit of the analytics and the data, We have statistical tools for you to kind of quantify those tools. We have a backtesting tool that we're building where you can backtest, create a hypothesis, validate that hypothesis. And then the final thing will to be ad trading, right? Have like a direct trading portal within Hyblock so that you can use all these analytics and trade all in one place, right? So that's like kind of the future vision of our product. So that's the stat analyzer. And then finally, we'll talk about the coin screener. Okay, again, so this is a macro, kind of like a bird's eye view of different indicators and how they're changing across all the coins, right? So again, we can take a look at something called like, we can look at an indicator that we talked about before, right? The global long percentage on Binance. So that is, where is that indicator? Here it is, long percentage global accounts. Okay, we can look at Binance. We can do maybe like a 1 hour look back, right? So we can see essentially what this heat map is showing you is how this indicator value, this global long percentage, is changing for different coins, comparing it to the market itself, right? So saying like, how is this coin's value changing? And is that value high or low compared to all the coins across the spectrum? Okay, so you can get a gauge of like where, like really get a gauge of when certain coins are moving, when they're changing their movement, when like the sentiment might be shifting to another direction by kind of getting this bird's eye view across all the coins. Okay. And again, we have a lot of support for different indicators in here. Retail versus whale divergence. This is another very powerful indicator that people use. Okay. And I think the last thing that I wanted to talk about is kind of for this line chart at the top. I think this is a very interesting tool that should be explored. What we have here is two lines. We have a blue line, or sorry, an orange line for price of this ticker, right? So this is, you can select any ticker, but I chose BTC. Okay. And then what you have is a blue line, right? Overlaid on top of it. This blue line is giving you kind of the global average of this indicator across all the coins. So what is the average value for this indicator across all your alts, right? And this is something that you don't see very often. I don't know many tools that kind of provide this kind of global indicator across multiple indicators. Also, obviously, you have like market cap indicators that show like price across all exchanges or across all coins, but showing you a global average for these very specific indicators, I think could be very powerful because I think for some instances, it could be a leading indicator rather than looking at a specific coin. Okay. Okay, great. I think that covers everything.